Imagine, uh, imagine 1 million monkeys turn loose on a massive trading floor.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, just absolute chaos. They are speculating on the stock market, buying and selling completely at random. Pure, chaotic monkey business.
Right.
So let's track their progress. After 1 week, by sheer statistical probability, about half of these monkeys will have made a profit and the other half will have taken a loss.
Makes sense.
The losers. You pack them up and send them home. So going into week 2, you have 500,000 monkeys left. And again, the pool halves.
It just keeps cutting down.
Exactly. Fast forward this exact same process for 20 weeks. Do you know what you're left with?
Just one monkey.
Exactly one monkey. This single solitary monkey has chosen the winning stocks every single week, 20 times in a row without fail.
Wow.
This monkey is now a billionaire. But here's the punchline. How do you think the financial media is going to react to this?
Oh, they'd be obsessed.
They will inevitably swarm the success monkey. They're going to bring in cameras, set up interviews with primatologists, and desperately try to study its brilliant underlying principles.
Of course they will.
They'll be like, maybe it eats more bananas than the others. Or look at how it pauses to groom itself before hitting the buy button. That must be the secret. They will completely convince themselves that this monkey possesses some unique recipe for success.
Which perfectly illustrates outcome bias, along with the illusion of skill.
Yeah.
As humans, we just desperately want to see patterns. We want to identify genius and intentionality where there is, in reality, only pure statistical randomness.
We want a reason for everything.
Right. We look at the outcome, a billionaire monkey or, a billionaire hedge fund manager for that matter, and we retroactively invent a narrative of skill to explain it.
We write a whole story about it.
Exactly. And what we fail to factor in are the 999,999 monkeys who did the exact same thing and failed.
That imagery really sets the stage for our mission today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're exploring a massive stack of book reviews, behavioral analyses, and some rather fiery literary critiques.
Very fiery.
They're all centered around Rolf Dobelli's international bestseller, The Art of Thinking Clearly.
It's a fascinating book.
It really is. Our goal is to explore the 99 cognitive biases that Dobelli argues constantly plague human decision-making. And we're also unpacking a massive, incredibly dramatic controversy surrounding the actual creation of this book.
Yeah, that drama it's something else. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, to really understand why our brains fall into these traps, we have to look at the biological why.
The evolutionary background.
Right. And we don't need to rehash the old basic analogy of cavemen running from rustling grass. I mean, anyone familiar with Daniel Kahneman's foundational work already understands the basics of System 1 and System 2 thinking.
The fast and slow brains.
Exactly. But the evolutionary mismatch here is how those ancient heuristics interact with hyper-optimized modern environments.
Right. The hardware basically hasn't been updated to match 21st century software.
That is a perfect way to put it. System 1 is fast, intuitive pattern recognition. It was great for immediate physical survival.
Kept us from getting eaten.
Kept us alive. But today, algorithmic social media feeds, complex financial instruments, targeted political campaigns, they are actively engineered to exploit that exact system.
And hijack it.
They bypass your deliberate logical system too entirely. They feed you immediate dopamine or, tribal outrage before you even realize you've made a decision.
So it's almost like the very shortcuts that kept humanity alive are now being weaponized against us.
Systematically weaponized, especially when we're trying to evaluate a complex business proposal or vote in an election.
Okay, let's unpack this because Dobelli highlights several biases that are particularly dangerous for us in the modern world.
He really does.
Let's start with the one he calls the mother of all misconceptions, confirmation bias.
Ooh, this is a big one.
It's the tendency to filter out new information that contradicts our existing views while actively seeking out data that proves we are right.
It operates subconsciously. It's essentially acting as a bouncer at a nightclub in your mind.
A bouncer, I like that.
Yeah, it only lets in the facts that agree with your pre-existing theories, and it just kicks out anything that challenges them. Let's actually test this. The research highlights an incredible thought exercise called the 2-4-6 experiment.
Oh, let's do it.
I'll play the professor, you play the student.
I am ready.
Okay. I am giving you a sequence of 3 numbers, 2, 4, 6. There is an underlying rule that governs this sequence. Your job is to figure out the rule.
Okay.
To do this, you can suggest your own 3-number sequences, and I will only tell you, yes, that fits, or no, that doesn't. What's your first guess?
Well, looking at 2, 4, 6, my brain immediately assumes the rule is even numbers increasing by 2.
Okay.
So I'll test 8, 10, 12.
Yes, that fits the rule.
Okay, how about 14, 16, 18?
That also fits the rule.
So the rule is even numbers increasing by 2.
You just failed the test.
Wait, I failed.
You fell into the exact same trap most students do.
Yeah.
You formulated theory, and then you only looked for evidence to confirm it.
Ah, I see. I didn't try to break my own hypothesis.
Exactly. The shrewd move is to actively look for disconfirming evidence. A better student would test -2, 4, and -43.
And you'd say no.
I would say, no, that does not fit. Then they might test 7, 8, and 9.
And that fits.
I would say, yes, that fits. By trying to break their own assumption, they are the only ones who figure out the actual incredibly simple rule.
Which is what?
Just the next number must be higher than the previous one.
Wow. That is so simple, but it completely shifts the perspective.
Doesn't it?
If you apply that to professional or leadership roles, the lesson is massive. Great leaders don't walk into a boardroom and ask, how can I prove my strategy is right?
They ask what they're missing.
Right. They ask, what am I missing? What data proves this strategy will fail? If you aren't looking for disconfirming evidence, you are flying blind.
And it connects directly to another massive trap Dobelli outlines, which is the sunk cost fallacy.
Another classic.
It is. This is the phenomenon where a person is reluctant to abandon a strategy or course of action because they've invested heavily in it, even when it's totally clear that abandonment would be more beneficial.
The classic example in the sources being the Concorde jet.
Yes.
The British and French governments continued funding the supersonic jet project for decades, just pouring billions into it, long after it was obvious the plane would never be commercially viable.
The psychology behind it is painful.
It really is.
To walk away from a bad investment, whether that's a plunging stock, a failing marketing campaign, or even a toxic relationship, it requires you to admit that you were wrong.
Which our brains hate doing.
The initial investment is gone. It's a sunk cost. But System 1 thinking hates admitting defeat. So we throw good money after bad to delay the psychological pain of the loss.
Which is exacerbated by authority bias, right? We have this deep-seated instinct to follow the instructions of an authority figure, even when they are demonstrably wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, the aviation industry had to completely overhaul its cockpit culture because of this.
The co-pilot problem.
Yes. For decades, co-pilots would notice a senior captain making a fatal error, flying too low, ignoring a warning light,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't say anything.
That's terrifying.
They would literally ride a plane into the ground rather than challenge the authority figure sitting next to them.
And it bleeds into domains where the authority isn't even relevant. We see a brilliant, charismatic CEO and assume they also have great geopolitical or medical insights. We blindly trust an expert outside of their actual circle of competence.
It's everywhere.
Well, that brings me to a really counterintuitive aha moment from Dobelli's synthesis. It's called the swimmer's body illusion.
Oh, I love this one.
This one genuinely messes with your head. It starts with Nassim Taleb, who we are going to talk a lot more about in a minute.
We certainly are.
So Taleb is looking to take up a sport to lose some weight. He looks around at different athletes. He notices that joggers look a bit scrawny, weightlifters look broad and bulky, but competitive swimmers have perfect, streamlined, highly attractive bodies.
The ideal physique.
Right. So he decides he is going to take up swimming to get a swimmer's body.
But professional swimmers do not get those perfect streamlined bodies because they spend hours in the pool.
It feels like they should.
It's the exact opposite. They are selected for the sport of competitive swimming because they are naturally built that way.
Their genetics.
Right. Their physique is a selection criterion, not the result of their activities. We constantly, systematically confuse selection factors with results.
Wait, but surely the hours of swimming do something to their physique, right? I mean, it can't be 100% genetics. Phelps trained intensely for years.
Well, of course, the training builds muscle and endurance, but the underlying skeletal frame, the massive wingspan, the disproportionately short legs, the hyperflexible ankles, that is genetic architecture.
You can't train that.
No. You could swim 10 hours a day for your entire life, and you will never look like Michael Phelps because you lack the baseline selection criteria.
Dobelli uses Harvard University as another example of this trap. People assume that going to Harvard makes you exceptionally smart and successful.
Which is a very common assumption.
But the reality is that Harvard doesn't necessarily make you smarter. The institution simply selects people who are already exceptionally smart, driven, and likely to succeed regardless of what name is on their diploma.
And this connects directly to survivorship bias.
Right.
Because we only ever see the survivors, the Olympic swimmers, the Harvard graduates, the billionaire startup founders. We systematically overestimate our own chances of success.
We only see the winners.
You read a biography of a famous tech CEO and think, if I just wake up at 4 in the morning, wear a black turtleneck, and meditate, I'll be a visionary too.
Just follow the routine.
But what you're ignoring is the graveyard of failures.
The graveyard of failures. For every successful entrepreneur on the cover of a magazine, there are thousands of people sitting in that graveyard of failure who followed the exact same path.
Exactly the same.
They had the same drive, they adopted the same morning routine, they raised the same capital, but they failed, often simply due to randomness, poor timing, or bad luck.
Because the media doesn't write extensive biographies about the thousands of people who failed, our perception of reality becomes dangerously distorted. We only study the winners, which gives us a highly inaccurate map of how the world actually works.
Speaking of inaccurate maps, here is where it gets really interesting. We have to talk about the massive controversy surrounding the book itself.
The drama.
Yes, and I want to be very clear with you listening right now. Our job here is to remain completely impartial. We are not taking sides.
Right, no sides.
We are acting strictly as reporters, outlining the allegations and the defenses exactly as they appear in the source material. Nothing more.
And the dispute centers on the very thin line between synthesis and plagiarism. The allegations were brought forward by Nassim Nicholas Taleb.
The author of The Black Swan.
Yes, and the originator of that swimmer's body story we just dissected. Taleb publicly accused Rolf Dobelli of serial plagiarism.
The details of the allegations are intense. Taleb claimed that he had entrusted Dobelli with an early, unpublished manuscript of his upcoming book, Anti-Fragile.
A huge breach of trust, if true.
According to the behavioral and literary circles tracking this, Taleb alleged that Dobelli took specific concepts, stories, and phrasing from that private manuscript and published them in German newspapers, and eventually in the English version of The Art of Thinking Clearly, without proper attribution.
Taleb pointed to highly specific overlaps that fueled this debate. Remember the story we opened with?
The monkeys.
The 1 million monkeys speculating on the stock market. Taleb claimed that exact framing was lifted from his work. He also pointed to specific phrasing, like the concept that humans prefer to have a wrong map rather than no map at all.
Perhaps most notably, Taleb pointed to a specific historical anecdote about Michelangelo creating the statue of David. Taleb had used it to illustrate a specific philosophical concept. He alleged Dobelli took the story and the philosophical application directly from his unpublished manuscript.
Right.
For Taleb, this wasn't just an academic citation error. He framed it as a severe breach of personal trust and professional ethics.
But Dobelli and his defenders certainly had a response.
They did.
They argued that The Art of Thinking clearly was never intended to be an original academic thesis. Dobelli's defense is that the book started out as just a personal checklist of cognitive biases that he compiled to help himself make better business decisions.
His defenders argue that he was simply drawing from the common consciousness of behavioral science. He was acting as a translator.
Exactly.
He took decades of dense, complex research from giants in the field like Taleb, Kahneman, Charlie Munger, and distilled it into easily digestible 3-page essays for the general public.
And furthermore, the defense notes that while the very first newspaper columns and editions may have lacked in-text citations, Dobelli maintained a book corrections page on his website.
He did add them eventually.
Right. He ensured that comprehensive citations were added to later editions, openly crediting Taleb and others.
So you have accusations of lifting unpublished work and claiming it as original insight on one side, and the defense of translating existing psychological concepts for a mass audience on the other.
It adds a fascinating layer of metadrama to a book entirely dedicated to ethics, clear thinking, and identifying bias.
It really does. But regardless of where you stand on the author's methodology, the underlying concepts remain incredibly potent. So what does this all mean for you? How can you actually apply this to your daily life, especially knowing your brain is biologically hardwired for irrationality?
The most practical takeaway from the sources is a concept called via negativa, or the negative way.
The negative way.
Ironically, we can explain this using that very contested story about Michelangelo. The historical anecdote claims the Pope asked Michelangelo, "Tell me the secret of your genius. How did you create the statue of David?"
And what did he say?
He answered, "It's simple. I removed everything that is not David."
I removed everything that is not David. That is brilliant.
In our modern professional lives, we are obsessed with addition. We want to know exactly what positive actions, what daily habits will guarantee success.
We want the secret recipe.
But complex systems don't work that way. We cannot definitively define what will make us successful. We do, however, know with absolute certainty what destroys success.
So the negative knowledge mathematically protects your downside. You might not be able to pick the next massive tech stock, but if you strictly avoid the obviously fraudulent companies, the ones with terrible balance sheets, you stay in the game longer.
Exactly. It's about avoiding stupidity rather than seeking brilliance.
I love that. Avoid stupidity.
If you want a functional team, you might not know the secret to eternal synergy, but you know that micromanagement, poor communication, and toxic behavior will destroy it. Clear thinking is the act of systematically chipping away the errors in your judgment. You remove the irrationality, and what is left over is a sound decision.
The behavioral research gives a practical rule of thumb for balancing this in your daily life. You don't have to agonize over everything. For small, low-stakes decisions like what brand of water to buy, or for things that are deeply within your specific circle of competence, trust your gut.
Let System 1 take over.
Exactly. Let that fast, intuitive System 1 brain take the wheel. But for major, complex decisions that carry massive consequences, investing your life savings, changing careers, acquiring a company, you must force yourself to slow down.
Consciously override those instincts.
Pull out the checklist of biases, look for disconfirming evidence, and rationally evaluate your choices.
Before we go, what's fascinating here is there's one final trap in Dobelli synthesis we don't even have time to fully unpack today. It's called the sleeper effect. It's where your brain entirely forgets that a source is completely untrustworthy or lying, but retains the lie itself as absolute truth over time.
That was wild.
Because of the sleeper effect, untrustworthy information actually gains credibility in your mind over time. I'll leave you to think about how many of your own deeply held beliefs might currently be infected by that.
A truly terrifying yet provocative thought to leave you with. Ask yourself how many of your most deeply held beliefs right now were originally planted by an unreliable source. Question your instincts, embrace doubt, and remember that clear thinking is simply the act of removing the errors. Thanks for joining our deep dive. See you next time.